Who's got your likeness on the internet? Intrepid reporter Kashmir Hill is here to tell us now. I'm James Polis. This is 0 Hour. Kashmir Hill is a top tech journalist at the New York Times and the author of Your Face Belongs to Us. Welcome, Kash. How are you?
Thanks, James. I'm good.
Okay, so whose face and belongs to whom?
Well, your face. If you use Venmo, if you use Facebook, if you used Instagram, if you have a photo on the internet, a company called Clearview AI has probably scraped it and put it in their database. They have 40 billion photos, and they created this app where you take a photo of somebody and it shows you everywhere their photo appears on the internet. So you can learn who they are, find their social media profiles, maybe find photos that they don't know exist and are on the internet. And they've been selling this to police departments for years now.
Okay, and now this sounds like something that people can initially get behind, right? We all pretty much know that if you put yourself out there on the internet, it's going to fly around. We've got cookies, we've got third-party agreements, and it all just kind of greases the wheels to make the whole thing go. So where does the problem start?
Well, the problem is, one, I don't think that people who put their photos on the internet necessarily knew that the internet was going to be made searchable by face. That's a new development, and I think very surprising for people. It also just means that your face becomes this kind of token to unlock your identity in the real world. So everything that's knowable about you on the internet can follow you. And my favorite example of this is Madison Square Garden, the events stadium. I assume you've been there before.
Oh, yeah.
So they've got the Knicks playing there, the Rangers playing there, Mariah Carey, all the big bands. That's their dream to play MSG. And Madison Square Garden started using facial recognition technology in 2018 for security reasons. But then in the last year, James Dolan, who owns it, thought, man, this would be a really good way to keep out people I don't like, namely lawyers that work at law firms that have sued Madison Square Garden. And so Madison Square Garden went to 90 law firms' websites, went to the bio pages for the lawyers, scraped their photos, and put them on this ban list. And so when a mom was trying to take her daughter's Girl Scout troop to see the Rockettes at Radio City Music Hall, she gets turned away at the door and told, you can't come in, you're a lawyer that works at a firm that has a lawsuit against us. You're not welcome. So you can see the way that this could possibly be weaponized to sorry, I'm like losing my train of thought. You can see how it can get weaponized against critics, against dissidents, just against anybody that you don't like. And you can find out who they are very easily with their face.
Well, it's tough with the private sector because, this is the land of we refused service to anyone at any time for any reason, right? So if you've got, whether it's a mom and pop or a major corporation, maybe a multinational corporation that's using this kind of technology, what's your answer when you're stopped at the door and turned away?
Well, we have discrimination laws, but they protect you from discrimination based on gender, based on age, based on race, based on disability. They don't protect you based on your occupation or what your political beliefs are or who you work for. And so right now we don't have protections against this. And in most of the country, we don't have laws that protect our faces or give us rights about who's using our faces. The one exception is Illinois. They have this rare law that moved faster than the technology, passed in 2008, Biometric Information Privacy Act, and it says that a company can't use your face print or your fingerprints or your voice print without your consent or pay a lot of money. And so Madison Square Garden has a theater in Chicago, but they can't use their facial recognition technology there to keep out lawyers because they would need the lawyers' consent to use their face.
Sure. Okay. And Illinois is the only one?
Yeah.
It's not model legislation?
No one else has. There's a couple. Washington has a form of the law. Texas has a form of the law. Illinois is the only one that says if somebody uses your face without your consent, they owe you $5,000. And so it's been very expensive for a lot of companies, technology companies. Facebook famously paid huge settlement over this. But yeah, we need laws because the technology is getting so powerful and it could really spread, and there's just no infrastructure, legal infrastructure, policy infrastructure to stop it right now.
All right, I want to dig into the law angle a little bit in a minute, but just first, let's paint a picture for us of how far and how wide your face can go. We're not just talking about, oh, you know, I got rejected at the theater because the owner doesn't like me. I mean, this stuff can really sort of go like level by level by level, far afield from your ordinary life, from where you live, from where you would think it might go, right?
Yeah, I mean, we're living in this world now where you have these companies, these AI companies, like Clearview AI, you know, OpenAI. These companies are just gathering all kinds of data that is on the internet. It's kind of fair game to them. And they're just sucking it up and using it, and you just have no control. So we know about Clearview AI collecting your face, but there's other companies that are doing it too. And there's actually a public face search engine now called PimEyes. It's got a smaller database. It only has 2 billion photos, you know, compared to Clearview's 40 billion, but anybody can use it. It's $30 per month, and you upload somebody's photo, and it'll show you other photos of them on the internet. You can identify people that easily. That company is run by a guy who lives in the country of Georgia. The corporate headquarters are in the UAE. Their legal services are run out of the Caribbean somewhere. Like, how do we regulate something like this when it's just popping up all over the world?
Yeah, that's globalization. I mean, take a look at something like WorldCoin, where you're straight up having your iris scanned in order to participate in this form of currency, right? That's encountering legal obstacles, but only in some places.
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to be joining WorldCoin myself.
No, the Spanish. I mean, the Spanish are sort of the first ones in, I don't know, kind of the upper layer of the West, I think, to say like, no, we're not going to allow this. But they've gotten into trouble in South America and some other places. But it does seem like this is a technological issue, and the law is oftentimes slow to catch up. And even if it does catch up, you know, sometimes the law can be draconian in the other direction. So how do you make sure that laws don't go overboard and you know, just add another problem to the mix instead of reducing the problem we have?
I mean, I like facial recognition technology. I like police using this to solve crimes. Clearview AI is extremely popular with child crime investigators who have photos of abuse, and they can use Clearview AI to identify the molester or possibly identify the child and find that person and save them. You know, I like using facial recognition technology to open my phone, you know, even at the airport, to cross borders now. Oftentimes they're scanning your face and making sure it matches your passport photo. But I do think that we need to rein in the more dangerous use cases and give us more control over who is allowed to use our face and what they're allowed to use it for.
If you're talking about something like local policing, it's really easy to get behind, hey, this is a tool that's going to help rescue kids, you know, okay, great. If you go up to the state level, maybe it gets a little more complicated, but obviously this is the kind of stuff that, you know, a head of a government agency would simply love to have their hands on. The tool's this powerful that gives you that kind of panopticon, that ability to suck in all the information about everyone all the time. What kind of legal framework or what kind of simply political pressure is going to be sufficient, if it's not too late, to make sure that our own federal government doesn't use these tools to build a digital tyranny around us?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's too late. Look, in other countries, they're much farther ahead on this. If you go to Moscow and you are walking around, there are surveillance cameras that are running facial recognition so that you can be tracked all the time, so that they can find people that are wanted in real time. If you go to a protest against the invasion in Ukraine, they're going to identify you, and a police officer is going to come to your door the next day and say, here's a ticket for unlawful assembly. That's the biggest question right now for us, is how ubiquitous is this going to be? You know, our local police departments using facial recognition to identify somebody from a surveillance camera is one thing. Having the facial recognition running on all the surveillance cameras all of the time, making people very trackable, that is the world that could be the world we're living in. You know, it could be more like China, be more like Russia. And if we don't want that, I think we need to put restrictions on this. And that means, you know, asking lawmakers, again, to pass laws.
And it's a really great temptation, that kind of power. You know, it does incentivize people in power to say, you know, who are my enemies? And Maybe I should even come up with some enemies so that I can mobilize political support, so that I can, I mean, this is just kind of the Machiavellian stuff you see play out in DC all the time. You get there and yeah, maybe you came there for the right reasons or whatever, but as you're drawn into the system, you're really rewarded for fighting and winning those turf battles, and rewarded for gathering power that, you know, maybe other agencies want too. You want to create those choke points and those bottlenecks where everything has to run through you. You know, I could name some names and have some examples, but we do have this kind of arms race, right? Where whether it's DHS, FBI, CIA, like every one of these agencies wants to be the one with the one ring to control them all. You can pass a law, but what kind of law? How big of a scope? Does this have to be a constitutional amendment in order to make sure that it covers all of our bases?
I mean, what do we do here? I mean, some people feel that already this violates the law, that this is violating the Fourth Amendment, which protects us against unconstitutional searches. Because every time the local police are, you know, looking for somebody, this shoplifter or this murderer, they are putting their photo in a database that includes your face, that includes my face, that includes the faces of most of the people that are watching right now. So should we be in the lineup every time they're looking to find a shoplifter or a murderer? And it's a relevant question to ask because sometimes, you know, this software is very powerful, but sometimes it gets it wrong. And so there have been a handful of people who have been arrested for the crime of looking like someone else. Yeah, I mean, these are like very granular questions. I think the kind of top level question, though, is, you know, should there be restrictions on this? Who should have access to facial recognition technology like this? Should it just be the police? Should it be companies? Should it be all of us?
Yeah, I want to run through some of the other sort of perils here. I mean, it's bad enough, the thought that your face has been so intimately analyzed by a computer that regardless of where you go, if there's a camera, basically, it'll be known. Like you can run, but you can't hide. So in that sense, you know, it's not just your face that they possess; it's all of you through your face. If you can be followed wherever you go, and it's impossible to sort of disappear, that's kind of the end of privacy, isn't it?
I think it's the end of anonymity as we know it. We would all become like celebrities, where everything you do could be associated back with you. And so you'd be at a restaurant, you couldn't kind of have a private conversation anymore and assume that the strangers around you won't understand the context. Because if you're saying something juicy, they could just take a picture of you and all of a sudden they know exactly who you are. And so it really would be this world where you have to assume you're always on record, that everything you're doing could come back to you. And I don't know, I just think that sounds like such a chilling version of the future that I hope that's not where we're heading.
I was watching the clips of the Academy Awards, and there's the moment when Emma Stone won her Oscar, and just this look that flashes over her face is one of like, oh no, just like seeing that you have become like the focus of part of the discourse that's just going to last. Who knows how it's going to last? This kind of technology really just feeds that hunger for a kind of constant social media, social credit surround, right?
Right, yeah.
Yeah, and it seems easy to say from there, like you can actually, you know, the more formalized a social credit system gets, the more it is going to be attached to evidence of where you are, evidence of who you're with, evidence of maybe how you're walking, how you're positioning yourself, maybe even the look on your face.
Right, you know, like on the internet, when you're surfing sites, they're always trying to identify you, right? And there's these cookies that are saying often, you know, what your political beliefs are, how much money you might have to spend. It's just all of this profiling that's been done to really understand who we are. The thing about facial recognition technology is that all of that could just go offline and be in the real world, so that when you walk into a store, they have your face and they know if you have ever shoplifted in your life, or if you're super rich and they should be really nice to you. You know, it could be a world that is great for some people, but it's going to be very difficult for other people, and it really depends on the context. But yes, it means the way we're profiled online will happen in the real world.
They say that good men create good times. Well, the same's true of businesses. Good people are the bedrock of successful enterprises. But unfortunately, today the hiring pool is bleak. Political demands, petty entitlement, open incompetence, they're all commonplace. You need to reach the people who are keen to join your business. New Founding has created a network of these high excellence professionals who are seeking to join grounded, pro-American businesses. These are individuals often in elite organizations who are ready to go for a team and a mission that supports their values instead of working against them. Aligned companies are using this network right now to hire high-trust, exceptional individuals who match the culture and the mission of their teams. Join the New Founding Talent Network. Find your next hire. Apply for access to the New Founding Talent Network at newfounding.com/talent. You'll get connected with the candidates who will build up your business. That's newfounding.com/talent. And doesn't this also ultimately take us into the world of pre-crime? Where, hey, if we're optimizing for, health and safety and security, then why not go the extra mile and say, look, we have the database, we have sort of all these patterns that emerge from this massive amount of information. And, if someone is behaving in this sort of way, or if they're captured, within a certain radius of these different kinds of buildings or agencies or establishments, all these possible indicators that when you add them up, you can maybe get to this person is maybe 51% likely to be about to commit a crime.
Yeah, when it comes to technology, there's this real belief that past is prologue. All of these AI systems, they take all this data and they make prediction based on it. And when it comes to us, they look at what we've done in the past and they assume that's who we're going to be in the future. So yeah, you could imagine this world in which you have a particular risk score based on, things that you have done in the past, decisions you've made, and that's projected all the time as you're moving through the world. But it means that it would be this world where we can't escape our past, where we can't change, because to these algorithmic systems, we just look like we're the person we were 10 years ago.
Yeah, it's still not illegal to maybe be about to commit a crime. But it seems like we're going in that direction. I mean, that's just incompatible with America as we know it, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is what is happening already. There are a lot of companies now, retailers, who use facial recognition technology, and they will kind of, clip your face if you do something wrong. If you're rude to somebody who works there, or if you steal something. And when you come in the next time, you are monitored, and you might either get kicked out or they might follow you. And I think most of us are saying, that's okay. But once we get used to that, we might see it happen in other ways. And it's, you can imagine this list of, well, these are people who are radical leftist, or these are people from the far right, and we don't want them coming into our establishment. I do think that if we just kind of let facial recognition technology keep going, we'll see use cases like that.
Yeah, we can also talk about, slight pivot here, but maybe not that much in the grand scheme of things. We can talk about deepfakes too. I mean, once these data sets are out there in the wild, they can be bought, they can be sold, they can be traded, on what's probably a gray or black market for this kind of information. And that can fuel nuclear all of the kinds of excesses and abuses that we've already seen associated with deepfakes, right? Yeah,
I mean, the specific thing that I'm worried about right now is that it's so easy to make a deepfake of somebody. So, you get their face, you make a deepfake of them in an embarrassing photo or in a pornographic photo. And you just kind of put it on the internet, seed it on the internet, knowing that one day it might show up in a search of their face. And it'll be a new way to create kind of reputational landmines for somebody.
Yeah, absolutely. On the other hand, I wonder if this is taking us to a place where people just really fundamentally do not trust what they see on the internet.
I think we are certainly in a time of information instability, and that maybe all of us should get offline a little more and spend more time in the real world. But yeah, it is. Every time I see a photo now, I'm always like, is this one real? And then sometimes, it's royalty, Princess Catherine, and it's not real. It turns out it is a little bit of a weird composite photo. We're increasingly doctoring our kind of depictions of the world, and it can be hard to trust what you see.
And it does seem like as the potential value or benefit of having to sit down, it's like work. You open up your phone and you're just scrolling through things, and increasingly the amount of critical analysis that has to be applied to what you're seeing. Yeah, I guess a little bit it's okay where you're like, is this something I should believe? But just the intensity of having to assess, to have like 100 Facebook moderators living in a basement in your brain whose job it is to go through everything you see and kind of try to figure out, should I care? Am I being taken advantage of? Is someone else being taken advantage of? It can become overwhelming. You can't really function in that kind of environment, can you?
Yeah, I mean, there is so much information that's being thrown at us all the time now. You know, we have the whole world's problems in our pocket on our smartphone. And it takes time to I always like publish stories, and I'll have people tweeting questions at me. And I'll say, oh, that's covered in the story. Do you read it? And they say, no, I just saw your tweet. And, and that's kind of the world we live in now. People are just reading the headlines, if that.
Yeah, it's kind of a lot. And at the same time that I feel some, I don't know if optimism is the right word, but I do think that there is still something at like a soul level where people are resistant to being carried along on this tide of information and being taken to a place where we all have to kind of be an intelligence agency in order to use the internet. However, a lot of this technology, what's the best use case for it? The best use case is compulsory. This is a tool of statecraft. This is the way we do politics now. We're fundamentally changing the nature of our regime, and you are going to participate, and it is going to be required, and you're not going to be able to function like in the old days where you think that you can just go where you like and not be detected and pay with cash and, use payphones. All that stuff is gone. The information environment is so insecure, and the competition between the great digital powers is so intense, and the possibility of some thing spiraling out of control in cyberspace is so freighted with this kind of everything's a national security crisis attitude that you're just going to be onboarded into this system and you're going to have to live with it because we say so. Do you think that that's coming?
I don't know. I think you can resist. One of my most recent stories was giving up my smartphone for a flip phone because I did want to take a step back. And, this was a very kind of stunty way to do it. But I do think that in general, maybe all of us should kind of step back a little bit more from kind of the digital world, smartphones, spend a good 3 hours a day not looking at a screen, not being on a device. I think that I'm hopeful that we can create the world that we want to live in and not just let it be created for us. Like, I do think that we need to make some important choices right now about the role that technology plays in our lives and put some restrictions and guardrails on it. It's kind of new. The internet's not that old. We've basically been living with it for 20 years, which is short in the kind of span of human history. And I just don't think that we have figured out yet the role we really wanted to play.
Yeah, I think that's right. On the one hand, I think sort of surrendering the field and saying, I can't, I'm not going to pay attention. I'm dropping out. Hopefully, I won't get the knock at the door. Hopefully, I won't open my door one day, and I'll just, the world's been changed out from under me. However, it is this kind of self-fulfilling prophecy, and the more people say, "Oh no, we need to panic about how digital tyranny is going to destroy us all. We need to spend all of our time on the phone, sort of arguing about it, talking about it." Really, it ends up just kind of memeing it into existence to a degree, doesn't it?
I don't know. I mean, I think it's important to be aware and to be thinking about it. But yeah, I don't think we should give up. I don't think we should be nihilist about it and say we're doomed and just accept it. I do think there should be a resistance movement and that we need to figure it out. And whether it's social rules or legislation, I do think it needs guardrails.
I think a lot of the difficulty people have in doing that just at kind of the everyday life level is it is hard to get a sort of fair and balanced or even just kind of trying to be objective or neutral, although that's kind of impossible, but you can make the effort. Some kind of reliable, trustworthy assessment of, to what degree is our federal government actively working to just kind of port everyone into a fundamentally new system of governance? To what degree do we have geopolitical rivals and adversaries around the world, like actively, doing really bad stuff, maybe blowing up pieces of infrastructure, maybe stealing important, national security secrets, maybe walking away with huge data sets? I mean, the GAO hack or just kind of the pilfering of all that information, seems like ancient history now. And that was a huge deal at the time. Just the Grindr data set, even, something like the ancestry sites, like 23andMe. I mean, these are massive troves. And a lot of people are in denial about it. Oh no, I want to figure out, if I have any, I don't know, like some obscure, I want to find out if my grandparents were really from the Isle of Man or whatever. Like, okay, it's heartwarming, but where is this data set going? It's hard for people to know. They're resistant to finding out the truth. There are all these competing, we live in this kind of propaganda surround sound, and it's hard for people to know and to make these fair assessments. And every one of these controversial situations is increasingly subject to, a kind of partisan political characterization, whether it's like, oh, domestic extremism, this is the new terrorism, or, oh, it's Russiagate, or no, it's the Chinese are trying to, put things into the chips that go into all of our strategic infrastructure, and they're going to activate them one day, and then it's going to blow everything up. These things are plausible, but it's really tough for the ordinary American to make heads or tails of it. What can they do?
Well, let's just talk about facial recognition technology. I think that people need to think more about the data that they're putting on the public internet. And I'm not talking about your private Instagram account. I'm talking about the public places. So a public, Facebook account, or, your public LinkedIn postings. There's just more and more of this information is getting scraped because this is kind of the business model of AI companies. So post privately. Depending on which state you live in, sometimes there's privacy laws that mean that you can request access to information that a company has about you. So if you're in California or Connecticut or Colorado or Virginia, you can go to Clearview AI and say, I want to see my file. And you can tell them to delete your face. So I think as individuals, these are some of the things that we can do, but that this is a problem that is systemic, and it needs to be addressed at a higher level. It's hard for individuals to protect themselves because we just have such a weak protection of privacy in the United States, and there's kind of a data free-for-all, as opposed to other places that say, information that you collect for one reason you can't use for something else. And I really do think that we need some kind of law like that. Do you think, and I'm not trying to drag you outside the lane of your beat. I know no reporter wants to be asked questions that are outside their purview, but still, if what you say is true, then we got to make some assessments. What level of politics do you think is right now the most appealing or the most plausible to start putting some of these protections in place? Local, state, federal? It's really been happening at the local and state level at this point when it comes specifically to privacy laws. As I mentioned, Illinois, one of these rare states that has this law that says you can't use people's biometrics without their consent. We're starting to see some state privacy laws that say, you can access the information a company has, you can delete it. There just isn't much happening at the federal level, unfortunately. And that's despite the fact that privacy is a bipartisan issue. Yeah. In 2018, there was a hearing about facial recognition technology. It was arranged by John Lewis, who very liberal Democrat, was at the time starting to conduct the investigation into Trump, and he held the hearing with Jim Jordan and Mark Meadows. And they said, there's not a lot that the three of us agree on. But we all agree that we need to do something about facial recognition technology because it's a threat to our privacy and our civil liberties. And yet, nothing happens. And so it really has been at the local level that we're seeing any kind of legislative movement. Yeah. Do you think there are serious folks in Washington, in Congress, who want movement on this? I think so. I was talking to Ed Markey the other day because I did this story about how our cars are collecting data about us that is making its way into the hands of the insurance industry. And I asked him, I said, why can't we get a privacy law passed? And he said that it's the technology information industry that they have really pushed back against legislation and made it difficult. But I do think that there's a lot of senators and lawmakers that care about this. And yeah, it's been frustrating to watch nothing really happen at the federal level for so long as the technology industry has gotten so powerful, and as every company has become a tech company, and they're all wanting to collect data and monetize data.
Let's talk a little bit about Silicon Valley then. So just in terms of pushback that members of Congress might be getting from the industry, are we talking just like public rhetoric or private conversations or massive lobbying operations or all of the above?
Yeah, I mean, technology companies certainly have lots of lobbyists, and I think there's a fear that you pass laws and it stands in the way of innovation, that we won't be the place where all of these, really powerful technology companies are based. They're kind of the shining light of the American economy, and so I think that's part of it too. Is that they're worried about getting in their way.
Yeah, wherever exactly you come down on these things, and the chessboard is shifting. It seems like almost every week at this point. There are disagreements now within Silicon Valley about some of these things, where the valence is, you've got kind of VC world looking at big tech and saying, well, you can't really trust these people, and they've been hoarding their money, and then they create something like Gemini, and they're not that kind of neutral, trusted observer that they presented themselves as being. Then you've got sort of critics coming in from the outside saying like, well, we say that we want the best immigrants, the smartest people to come in. Well, a lot of those people aren't U.S. citizens, and so you have potential security risks there. I mean, it seems like all of Silicon Valley has become a kind of political football in the national security world, and I'm not sure if that dynamic can work out in a way that's going to result in outcomes that regular, ordinary American people are going to be down with. It seems like it's going to be pitched as this is a war, and you're either on Team America or you're on the bad guys' team.
Yeah, I mean, so much power has shifted to Silicon Valley, right? And these companies are really, they're really powerful. I mean, they have billions of users. If they were countries, they would be the largest countries in the world. And right now, because there isn't much in the way of regulation or laws, it's the companies themselves that are becoming the policy setters. They're deciding what the world should look like. And that was really interesting, actually, with facial recognition, because Clearview AI came along, built this incredible product that could recognize anyone. And when I first heard about them, I wondered, why is this random company I've never heard of before the one that did this? And why isn't it Facebook or Google that have lots of people's faces and very powerful algorithms? And it turned out that Facebook and Google had developed facial recognition technology that could identify anyone years earlier, as early as 2011 with Google. And it was the rare time that they decided to hold the technology back. Google's chairman at the time said they were worried about how a dictator would use that kind of power, how an authoritarian government would. And so they didn't release it. And so I thought that was very interesting because I don't think that we think of Facebook or Google as being conservative when it comes to kind of shocking new technologies or privacy practices. But it was one time that they did hold the technology back, and they delayed at least 5 years, 10 years, this kind of superpower coming out.
Did they hold it back from our own government?
I don't think that Facebook or Google was running anything like this for the government. Amazon has recognition, spelled with a K instead of a C in there, and they do offer a pretty powerful facial recognition algorithm. And they were starting to work with police, but they were doing it the way that most facial recognition vendors do it, which is the facial recognition vendor brings the algorithm, and then the government brings the database. So it's your mugshot database or state driver's licenses. And what was really different about Clearview AI is they said, here's the whole internet, and you can find anyone. And that was kind of their ethical breakthrough, if you will.
Remember when business used to be about making money, taking care of your customers, and providing for your family? What happened? Wokeness, DEI, ESG, they've conquered America's best companies. But the spirit of the American entrepreneur is still free. Now more than ever, the best founders in America are walking away from corrupt big corporations and blazing their own trail. New Founding is rallying these founders, who just want to get back to that original American idea of building inspiring, disruptive companies, the very best in the world. New Founding is investing in these companies through their venture fund. The companies they invest in are defined by a simple question. Does the country we want to live in need this company that this person is building? You can join them. Venture investing isn't for everyone, but if you're a serious, accredited investor who wants to see a more hopeful future for this country, go to newfounding.com/venture fund and apply to be an investor. Again, that's newfounding.com/venture fund. Join their venture fund today. I agree. This is a bipartisan issue. You look at Congress and you do have people on both sides who are trying to put something together. At the same time, this is the kind of issue that you would have thought would elevate libertarian candidates and a libertarian movement to new heights of popularity. But that's not really what happened. Why do you think that is?
I don't know. I mean, there's so many issues that people vote on. I don't know if technology is high when it comes to why people vote the way that they do.
Yeah. All right. Well, future of facial recognition. What's it going to be? Where, if you had to lay some money down on which way this thing's going to go, what would you do?
Well, I think there's a world in which maybe we pass some laws, we restrict access. Maybe it's just something that police use to investigate, crimes that have been committed and try to find the bad guys. Or I could imagine it being more ubiquitous. Or I could imagine a company like Facebook, Meta, for example, releasing something like this into the world. And they decided not to. They sat on it before. They've actually turned off facial recognition completely on Facebook.com a couple of years ago. But their chief technology officer said, we're working on these augmented reality glasses. I'd love to put facial recognition in these, so that if you're at a cocktail party and you see someone there that you recognize and you should know their name, he said, we could just supply that name to you and it would be great.
Or would it?
But that they're
Depends
worried,
on the person, I guess.
Would it be legal to do that? Do people want them to do that? And so while I've been on book tour, I've been around the country. I was in Italy, and I've asked different rooms of people, hey, if Facebook put facial recognition in these glasses, would you want to be identified? It could be like your Facebook profile where you have privacy settings for your face, and you could say, everyone can recognize me, or just friends, or friends of friends. And, I asked that question in Milan, and no one in the room raised their hands. I asked that question in New York. There was maybe one or two people in a room of 150 people that raised their hands. I asked that question in San Francisco, and half of the room raised their hands saying, yeah, I'd like to be identifiable. Yeah. And, these companies are based in Silicon Valley. There's a different world that they are creating than maybe we want them to be creating outside of the San Francisco Bay Area.
Yeah, that's remarkable. You mentioned a little bit earlier people responding to your work, but not having really read it. You actually go through the trouble of sort of doing a substantial word count, and then they ask you questions. And if they only read it, then maybe they know the answer. This book has done well. It kind of broke through the noise. It's increasingly tough to do unless you're just kind of like trying to game the bestseller lists. You did it for real. How's the feedback been? Are people freaking out? Are they just kind of treating it as the latest piece of, just kind of fodder for the discourse? Where is the reader at?
Yeah, I don't know. I get a lot of questions. I mean, there's still some people who don't know about the existence of Clearview AI, who don't know that facial recognition has gotten as powerful as it's gotten. A lot of people ask me, how come people are more protected in Illinois than they are where I live? Why don't I have any laws that protect me when it comes to this? Why don't I have a law like they have in California where they can go and tell Clearview to delete their face? So I think it really has raised awareness about the fact that the privacy protections in the US and around the world are very different, and people do seem to want some kind of laws to protect themselves here. And I think some people are just nihilists, privacy nihilists, and they say, well, this is how it's going to go. We're just going to live in this world where everyone knows who you are all the time.
Yeah, I mean, that's the scariest thing to me, really. I try not to let myself get spooked about all kinds of things, but especially this kind of stuff. But it's really just the fatalist who's like, well, I guess everything that kind of made life worth living is obsolete, and I don't know where this is going, but we'll see.
One thing that gives me hope is that, in the 1950s and the 1960s, the big technology development of that day was these little listening devices, bugs, wiretapping equipment, and there were no laws around it. And so there was all kinds of taping of people's private conversations. Of course, Richard Nixon was recording the conversations of everybody who went to the White House.
Gave us lots of great movies, a lot of great 70s paranoia.
Yeah, I mean, you had private investigators that would wiretap, people's phone lines because they were trying to gather evidence of infidelity. And there was a real panic in the country. And they said, wow, you're not going to be able to have a private conversation again. Privacy as we know it is over. And then we passed laws. That made eavesdropping illegal, that criminalized wiretapping. And those laws are the reason why these surveillance cameras that are all over the country, watching us all the time, they're only recording our images and not our voices, not our conversations.
Yeah, well, hopefully that doesn't lead to a world in which no one is allowed to spy on anyone else, with the exception of the all-powerful federal government that is everywhere at all times. I don't know. We've got, there's much that can be said about Donald Trump and the whole sort of Trump thing, but the guy hasn't gone away, and there is this election coming around the bend, and the assessment of the Biden administration to date is one that seems to have left a lot of people sort of wondering, is it just going to keep being like this forever? Is it going to get worse? A lot of uncertainty, a lot of dissatisfaction in the air. Do you think that whatever it is that happens come November, do you think there is that kind of a sufficient popular ferment and a kind of unease and unrest that could give the kinds of privacy laws that you'd like to see a boost in the close of this year?
Really have no idea. I worked in DC, of course, when we met a decade ago, and was covering kind of law and technology and privacy, and it just was frustrating because the laws never got passed. There were lots of bills that were drawn up, and it just never happened. And so it's just so hard to predict the future. But I will say, looking at the past, when it comes to privacy protections, it's really happening at the local level, at the state level. And for those reasons, it's kind of important that people pay attention because you can actually affect the outcome at the local and state level.
Yeah, I think that's well said. And, maybe one upshot of just the paralysis and the seeming like, every year in DC seems to be like a sort of weird, a copy of a copy of a copy of the year that came before, and it is burning people out. That is a good reminder that you can actually still exercise some kind of real political agency where you live. And if the cost of that is that some states are going to have radically different approaches to some of these major, questions that really just dig at what does it mean to be a human being in a society, like what is the experience of our consciousness as individuals and as members of groups, what's it going to be? If states do start to diverge on that, it might make for a weirder United States of America than we're used to, where if you do jump in that plane and if it doesn't drop out of the sky and drop its tires on cars below, and you land on the other side of the country, or even just a few states over, life might be significantly different. And maybe that's just the price that we're going to have to pay in order to recover a kind of political agency that actually starts to move on these kinds of issues.
Right. I mean, that's the case right now, like U.S. versus Europe. In the U.S., Clearview AI is doing what they're doing. In Europe, in Canada, in Australia, privacy regulators investigated the company, and they said, you can't do this. You can't collect people's faces from the internet, from social media sites without their consent. That violates our privacy laws. And they said it was illegal, and so Clearview AI is not operating there. They also said that the company needed to delete their citizens' photos. And Clearview said, well, I can't tell from somebody's face if they live in Italy or if they live in Texas. So sorry, we can't help on that.
Well, I think I'll leave you with this. Maybe people come to you all the time and say, well, what should I do? How can I not get sucked up into this system where I have no control over my agency or my destiny? Sometimes, you get T&Cs, you can kind of click your way through, and if you're willing to go down that rabbit hole, you can maybe, if you have your attorney sitting next to you, make some informed choices about what to opt in and what to opt out of. But is the horse out of the barn? Like, what would you recommend people do if they're concerned about this issue and want to exercise a little bit more control over the fate of their visage on the internet?
Right. Like, it's impossible to completely control your own privacy, your own data. We live in a world in which we're just kind of leaking it out all of the time. And so that's difficult. And that's why I do think it requires some kind of law to protect us, because this is modern life now. You can't go live in a cave and make sure that nobody gets your data and no one takes a picture of your face. It's just impossible. But in terms of day-to-day, what you can do, again, thinking about what you post to the internet. I tell parents, I have 2 young daughters, and I try to avoid putting any photos of them on the public internet, because I know that this technology exists, and I want them to be able to decide for themselves, what their exposure is to the world. So I tell parents, like, don't put photos of your kids on the internet, and in general, don't be posting things publicly, keep things private. And if you're so lucky to live in one of the states that offers greater privacy protections, delete yourself from these databases.
Well, you're one of those guests where I'm not going to ask where people can find you. The book is out there pretty much everywhere books are to be found. You're in the New York Times pretty often. Is there anything else, like a Twitter handle or X handle or whatever, that you'd like people to know?
I'm Cash Hill everywhere on the internet, and whatever your favorite social media site is.
There you go, Cash Hill. Keep at it. We will be reading.
Thank you so much, James.
Absolutely. And that's all the time that we have today. So please give us a like, subscribe, comment below. Tell me who you want me to interview. And until then, next time around, I am James Polis. This is 0 Hour, and may God have mercy on us all.